Nina Simone had a secret love affair that could have destroyed both their careers and changed American political history. For 3 years, she carried on a passionate relationship with one of the most powerful white politicians in Washington. Tonight, I'm revealing the forbidden romance that nearly caused a national scandal and why they both chose to bury the truth forever. The year was 1966, and America was burning. Cities across the nation erupted in racial violence, civil rights leaders were being assassinated, and the country seemed to be tearing itself apart along racial lines. In this climate of hatred and division, the last thing anyone expected was for Nina Simone, the angry voice of Black America, to fall in love with Senator William Bradford, a white politician from Massachusetts who was being groomed by the Democratic Party as their next presidential candidate. Their affair began at the most unlikely place, a congressional hearing on civil rights. Nina had been called to testify about the treatment of Black artists in America, and Senator Bradford was one of the few white politicians who seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. While other senators checked their watches or whispered among themselves, Bradford hung on every word, asking thoughtful questions that showed he understood the complexities of her experience. After the hearing, Bradford approached Nina privately. "Miss Simone," he said, "I want you to know that your testimony today was the most powerful thing I've heard in 20 years of public service. Would you be willing to meet with me privately to discuss how we might work together on upcoming legislation?" Nina was skeptical. She had dealt with plenty of white politicians who talked a good game in public, but did nothing when it mattered. But there was something different about Bradford, and sincerity in his eyes, a genuine passion for justice that she rarely saw in Washington. Power brokers. Their first private meeting was scheduled for Bradford's Senate office, but he suggested something unusual. "Miss Simone, I know you don't trust politicians, and frankly, I don't blame you. But if we're going to work together effectively, we need to talk somewhere we can be completely honest with each other. Would you be willing to meet at my private residence? My wife is visiting her family in Boston, and we could speak freely." Nina agreed, though every instinct told her to be cautious. She arrived at Bradford's Georgetown mansion on a rainy October evening, expecting a brief policy discussion. Instead, she found herself drawn into a conversation that lasted until dawn. Bradford wasn't like other politicians. He had grown up poor in South Boston, the son of Irish immigrants who faced their own discrimination. He understood what it meant to be an outsider, to fight for respect in a system designed to keep you down. More importantly, he had done his homework. He knew Nina's music, her history, her struggles in ways that showed genuine study and care. "I've listened to Mississippi Goddamn probably 100 times, Bradford told her as they sat by his fireplace, sharing a bottle of wine. "Every time I hear something new, not just anger, but pain, hope, love. You're not just protesting against something. You're fighting for something. That's what real leadership looks like." Nina found herself opening up to Bradford in ways she rarely did with anyone. She told him about the FBI harassment, the blacklisting, the loneliness of being a voice in the wilderness. Bradford listened without judgment, without trying to minimize her experiences or offer empty reassurances. "You know what the hardest part is?" Nina said as the night wore on. "It's not the hatred from the racists. I expected that. It's the indifference from people who should be allies. The white liberals who applaud politely and then go home to their segregated neighborhoods. The Black leaders who think I'm too radical, too angry, too uncompromising." Bradford reached across the space between them and took her hand. "You're not too anything, Nina. You're exactly what this country needs, even if it's too scared to admit it." The physical attraction had been building all evening, but it was that moment of understanding, of genuine connection, that broke down the last barriers between them. They made love that night with a passion born of mutual respect, shared struggle, and the intoxicating danger of crossing the ultimate taboo. Their affair continued for 3 years, conducted in absolute secrecy. They met at Bradford's Georgetown home when his wife was away, at discreet hotels during Nina's concert tours, and occasionally at a cabin Bradford owned in the Virginia mountains. They developed elaborate codes for communication, with Bradford calling Nina's manager with scheduling requests that were actually romantic assignations. The relationship was complicated by the reality of their public positions. Bradford was married to Eleanor Bradford, a prominent socialite from an old Boston family whose support was crucial to his political ambitions. He was also being positioned as the Democratic Party's great white hope for 1972, the moderate liberal who could unite the country after the divisions of the 1960s. Nina, meanwhile, was increasingly radical in her public statements, calling for armed resistance and revolutionary change. Her association with Black Panthers and other militant groups made her a target of FBI surveillance and a liability to anyone seeking mainstream political acceptance. But in private, their connection deepened beyond the physical. Bradford became Nina's confidant, the one person who truly understood the weight she carried as the voice of Black anger and pain. Nina became Bradford's conscience, challenging him to be bolder in his political positions, to risk more for the cause of justice. "You could be president, William," Nina told him during one of their midnight conversations. "But only if you're willing to tell the truth about this country, about racism, about what really needs to change." Bradford was torn between his love for Nina and his political ambitions. He knew that being with her, even secretly, was the end of any presidential hopes. If their affair became public, it would destroy not just his career, but potentially set back the cause of civil rights by decades. A scandal involving a white politician and a radical Black activist would play into every racist stereotype and conspiracy theory. The pressure intensified in 1968. Bradford was being seriously considered for the vice presidential slot on Hubert Humphrey's ticket, but FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover had become aware of the affair. In a private meeting with Democratic Party leaders, Hoover made it clear that Bradford's associations made him unsuitable for higher office. "We have evidence," Hoover told Party Chairman Larry O'Brien, "that Senator Bradford has been carrying on an inappropriate relationship with a known subversive. The security implications alone make him unfit for national office." Bradford was forced to remove himself from vice presidential consideration, citing personal reasons. Nina, watching the man she loved sacrifice his dreams for their relationship, was devastated. "This is my fault," she told Bradford after he withdrew from consideration. "Your career, your marriage, everything, I've ruined it all." Bradford held her as she wept, but his own heart was breaking. "Nina, loving you hasn't ruined anything. It's been the most real, the most honest part of my life. But we both know this can't continue." The end came in 1969, not through discovery or scandal, but through a mutual recognition that their love was becoming destructive to everything they both cared about. Bradford's marriage was deteriorating, his political effectiveness was compromised by constant FBI scrutiny, and Nina was being increasingly marginalized within the civil rights movement due to whispers about her inappropriate associations. Their final meeting took place at the Virginia cabin where they had shared some of their happiest moments. Both knew it was goodbye. "In another life," Bradford said, holding Nina close, "we could have been together openly. We could have changed the world together." "In another life," Nina replied, "we wouldn't have needed to change the world. We could have just loved each other." They agreed to end all contact, to never speak publicly about their relationship, to carry their love as a secret that would die with them. It was the most painful decision either had ever made, but they both understood it was the only way to preserve what they had built: Bradford's political career and Nina's artistic integrity. The aftermath was devastating for both of them. Bradford threw himself into his Senate work with renewed intensity, becoming one of the most effective champions of civil rights legislation in Congress. But those who knew him well noticed a change, a sadness, a sense of loss that he never quite shook. Nina's response was more dramatic. Within months of ending the affair, she left America for Barbados, beginning the exile that would define her later years. She told friends she was leaving because of FBI harassment and career blacklisting, but those closest to her suspected there was more to the story. The secret of their affair was kept by only a handful of people. Bradford's chief of staff, who had arranged many of their meetings, took the truth to his grave. Nina's manager, who had facilitated their communications, never spoke of it publicly. Even Eleanor Bradford, who almost certainly knew about the affair, maintained her silence for the sake of her husband's political career. In the 1970s, as Bradford rose to become one of the most powerful senators in Washington, journalists occasionally asked about his relationship with civil rights leaders. He always spoke respectfully of Nina's contributions to the movement, but never hinted at their personal connection. Nina Simone is one of the most important voices of our time, he would say. Her music and her message helped awaken America's conscience about racial injustice. We should all be grateful for her courage. Nina, living in exile, was equally discreet. In interviews, she would mention Bradford only as one of the few white politicians who genuinely supported our cause. She never elaborated, never gave details, never suggested their relationship was anything more than professional. But those who knew them both noticed the pattern. Whenever Bradford faced a tough re-election campaign, a significant donation would mysteriously appear from an overseas supporter whose identity was never revealed. Whenever Nina faced financial difficulties in exile, an anonymous benefactor would quietly pay her bills or purchase her recordings. The truth about their relationship remained buried until Bradford's death in 1994. Among his personal papers, his family found a sealed envelope marked "personal," not to be opened until after Nina's death. Inside were letters, photographs, and a detailed account of their 3-year affair. Bradford had written a final letter to Nina that was never sent, "My dearest Nina. By the time this letter is read, we will both be gone, and our secret will finally be safe to tell. I want the world to know that loving you was not a scandal or a mistake. It was the purest, most honest thing I ever did. You taught me what it meant to fight for justice, not just talk about it. You showed me that love can exist even in the darkest times, even between people who should have been enemies. I hope history will remember us not for the color of our skin or the difference in our positions, but for the fact that we loved each other enough to sacrifice that love for something greater." Nina died in 2003, 9 years after Bradford. She never saw his final letter, never knew that he had documented their relationship for posterity. Her own papers, discovered after her death, contained dozens of unsent letters to "my dearest Dul," letters full of love, longing, and regret for what might have been. The revelation of their affair, when it finally became public in 2005, sent shockwaves through both political and musical circles. Some criticized them for the secrecy, for the deception involved in their relationship. Others praised their sacrifice, their willingness to give up personal happiness for the greater good. But perhaps the most telling reaction came from those who had worked with both of them during the height of their affair. They revealed a pattern that had gone unnoticed at the time: how Bradford's most passionate speeches about civil rights came during the years he was with Nina. How his legislation was most effective when he was drawing on her insights and experiences. Similarly, some of Nina's most hopeful, most beautiful songs were written during their time together. Even in the midst of racial turmoil and political upheaval, she had found moments of peace, of love, of possibility that came through in her music. Their affair had made them both better at what they did, Bradford a more effective advocate for justice, Nina a more complete artist. But it had also shown them the true cost of change in America, the personal sacrifices required of those who dare to cross the lines that society draws in the end. The love affair between Nina Simone and William Bradford became a symbol of both the possibility and the tragedy of America in the 1960s. It showed that love could transcend racial barriers, that understanding could develop between the most unlikely people. But it also demonstrated the price of such love in a society not ready to accept it. They loved each other enough to let each other go. They understood that their relationship, if revealed, would have been used to discredit not just them, but the entire cause they both served. Their sacrifice was private, their pain was hidden. But their impact on American history was real. Perhaps that's the most romantic thing about their story. Not that they loved each other despite their differences, but that they loved their country and their cause enough to give up their personal happiness. It was a love affair that could have changed American political history, and in its own way, it did. Because sometimes the greatest love stories are not about getting what you want, but about choosing what's right. And sometimes the most powerful relationships are the ones that remain secret, known only to the hearts that were brave enough to risk everything for a love that could never be publicly acknowledged.